What is the AI opportunity? There's so much talk about AI. We just participated in the Google Cloud event in San Francisco this week. It's all about AI, and this is just one of many events. VMware last week, and Amazon's reInvents coming up. And I mean, it's just one after the other. Tesla just had their FSD 12 presentation, which is a big AI moment. So AI is everywhere. And the question is, I mean, there's a couple of questions, but let's start with, okay, what is the opportunity? And then we want to also answer the question right off the bat that, is this hype? Is this real? This is real. It's real because it's driven by compute. Whenever compute changes, whenever we have a new area of compute or something changes on the compute side of things, that's where revolutions happen. That's where business, humanity, GDP, any measure you want for progress, for opportunity, for wealth creation. I would also say for increase of happiness of humanity, but let's not go there. In general, what we consider as progress here at Orange Capital Partners, all of these things are driven by compute, and that's why it's such a big deal. This is not even on podcast. It's August 31st, 2023. This is Scrim Delco. For today, the fund is up 1%. The market's down 0.5%. For the year, we are up 125.1%. The market's up 17.4%. We're outperforming by 107.7%. So what is the AI opportunity? The AI opportunity is driven by compute. It's driven by compute because, like Jensen Huang says, we have two massive architectural changes in compute. One is accelerated compute, the other is generative AI. Let's parse that. What does that mean? What does accelerated compute actually mean? It means that a lot of workloads can be parallelized, and they can be parallelized for three reasons. One is we have GPUs, second is we have interconnect, and third is we have memory and storage solutions that allow us to parallelize compute, and most importantly also use the AI models that we have at our disposal that are incredibly memory intensive. The bottleneck is memory, and the solution is that's what NVIDIA is offering, which is a parallel compute with interconnect, a memory solution. All of these things are, of course, related because you can have massive parallel compute, but then you don't have interconnect. So let's just think about SIMD, okay? Single instruction, multiple data. Like you have massive amounts of data that get parallel computed, and then you have to store the results somewhere to use the results for the next batch of compute. And if you don't have interconnect, you literally have to store it maybe on chip. That's expensive, that power intense and all that stuff. If you have a good interconnect, you can move it somewhere very quickly where it can be maybe parsed out, maybe recalculated, so on and so forth, and you get much faster results. So I don't know the details of the NVIDIA solution. I don't know exactly what they've done to make this happen, but I know the big picture. Again, it's GPUs, interconnect, it's CUDA, it's the software side of things that they've enabled. Why am I talking about NVIDIA here? Because everything starts with compute. You don't have a revolution in business, not these days, maybe 300 years ago, but not these days. These days, we're still in the, if you want, third industrial revolution, which is the information age. We're still in that part of the revolution because we started with Turing, and then we had the first computers, then we had the transistor, then we had the mainframe, client server, we had internet, and now we have let's call it the age of AI. The age of AI is driven by a new architecture of compute. It's accelerated compute, generative AI. What is generative AI? Well, generative AI just means that from a body of knowledge, we can generate summaries, maybe new knowledge. We can interact with people, and that is the opportunity that OpenAI has showed us is massive. It's created all this buzz also, particularly in the enterprise. Google Cloud is just one example. They're betting everything on generative AI. Of course, in the enterprise, that makes a lot of sense because what is enterprise compute? It's actually just another word for consumer compute, because in the end, the enterprise is just people, and they have to use this technology, and they'll pay for it if it's useful for them. Now, what do we consider the opportunity here at Orange Capital Partners? Why are we excited about this? We are interested in real-world AI. And the reason we're interested in real-world AI is not because that's a fancy word or because Tesla's in there, because that is the only AI that actually matters. The AI that Google and these people are talking about, that is the imitation game. That is the Alan Turing type of AI, which is very powerful, which is the origins of artificial intelligence. Start with Turing, imitation game, World War II, Enigma, all of that stuff. If you haven't heard, if you don't know what I'm talking about, watch the movie, The Imitation Game, or read about Alan Turing, you will understand. I don't want to spend time here explaining all of that. Now, we're in a different area. We're in the it matters what cats do and not what logic can tell us. This is a quote from Jitendra Malik, and he got it, I think, from Rodney Brooks, according to the recent podcast interview he gave on Peter Abeel's Robot Brain podcast. What matters is what cats can do. In other words, we have a robot that goes through nature and starts learning end to end, and then figures out how to navigate nature, solve problems. And this is how intelligence actually emerges. Intelligence is an emergent property of solving problems in the real world. I'm standing on a beach right now. If I want to jump in the water, I have to solve a lot of problems. There's rocks in front of me. There are waves. There's a coral reef. There's a current. There's weather. There's all kinds of things that I have to take into account. If you wanted to explicitly program me to deal with this problem, you would have to spend a lot of time, and you would still go wrong because you can't foresee all the possible, circumstances. If I have an end-to-end system, which a human is, from birth on, we start learning and learning and learning. We have of course, information stored in our DNA. We have some sort of memory, even maybe through generations transmitted. We have learnings and a lot of things, but we still are an end-to-end learning machine. And this is how we at Orange Capital Partners, how Jitendra Malik, how Elon Musk, how a lot of people think intelligence will actually emerge. It is the end-to-end learning. End-to-end is the robot's best friend. This is the phrase that we coined here at Orange Capital Partners. Now, the opportunity presents itself because we have a culmination of things. We have the models are available, we have the compute is available, and we have somebody who's got the guts to do it, and that is Elon Musk and Jensen Huang. Both of these people are instrumental in driving AI. It is incredibly important to understand this, okay? You can have a lot of developments, in science, you can have developments in business, you can have money and finance, but if you don't have somebody who's got the guts and the balls to actually execute a massive plan, it's not going to happen. This was the case in the past with Thomas Edison and those sort of people. This is the case today. Now, I don't know exactly how these things are correlated. In other words, maybe there is always somebody who's got the balls and it has to start with science. Or maybe it's the other way around. Science actually is driven by the people who have the balls, because once, let's say in this case, we have Jensen Huang building this massive compute infrastructure with NVIDIA, that opens up new opportunities for computational engineering and those sort of things. So you have the application of AI models for engineering solutions, and the next thing you know, material science progresses, and next thing you know, somebody's going to fly to Mars much earlier than we ever thought. I don't know which one is first, but I want to emphasize the fact that the opportunity in AI today is driven by scientific progress, technological innovations, but most importantly, by the availability of entrepreneurs of the caliber of Elon Musk and Jensen Huang, who are actually driving this forward. And just looking at the Google Cloud event this week at the Moscone Center in, I think it's Moscone or Masonic, I'm not sure, one of those in San Francisco. You can see like Google Cloud is a corporate solution for corporate problems. It's a decent business, but it's not. This is not what we're talking about when we talk about wealth creation. these are corporate people. There's a lot of jargon. There's not too much meat around the bone in terms of innovation. It's a lot of incremental stuff and so on and so forth. I don't want to bash Google here. The same applies to Oracle. Not so much Microsoft. Microsoft has been able to leap a little bit faster, and that's beyond the scope of this episode. Doesn't matter. I want to say that the real wealth creation happens when people have the guts to actually execute on a grand plan. Jensen Huang built a massive compute infrastructure. He built a software on top of it, and he built an interconnect technology, things along the lines of software-defined networking within the data center. A lot of things that sound pretty obvious once they're executed, but take a lot of guts to implement when you have nothing, and when you have a business to protect that is at best neutral, if not suffering, because you're investing in all these endeavors that might pay off in 5 to 10 years. Same with Tesla. Just take DOJO, right? DOJO is something that started a few years ago. Maybe it wasn't material in the sense that even if it costs 2 or 3, 4 billion for a company that does 100 billion in sales, that is not the end of the world. But it's still a massive endeavor. And now we're here. Now we're at the crossroads of where DOJO actually could become an instrumental part of the training solution for the end-to-end training for Tesla. Take the operating system within the car. Another thing where maybe 10 years ago when the Model S was launched wasn't as crucial, because back then it was important to find customers who want to drive electric cars. So who cares about the operating system in a car? Today we care a lot about that, because all the over-the-air updates, a lot of the sensor technology that can get better through software, a lot of the software-defined features of the car are driven by the operating system in the car. So there is a flywheel effect. There is a lot of opportunity, a lot of value creation for customers driven by a decision that was made maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that had no material impact whatsoever at that time, but today is very important. That's the kind of guts, balls that you need to have as a CEO. I always like to use another example, which is the Amazon example. Apparently Amazon early on had to rewrite all their software for a distributed compute platform, which turned into AWS. It was a big decision that Bezos made back then. He made it, cost people not just money, but also he lost talent and things like that, because a lot of legacy talent wasn't on board with these types of solutions. And of course, AWS became a massive success. Good example also with Tesla. We had the sort of software 2.0 movement at Tesla years ago, started by Karpati. And it was the idea that you go away from explicit programming towards data curation. And that is, of course, sounds reasonable today. Back even 5 years ago, a lot of senior software people just weren't on board. They didn't like the idea that you're going away from explicit 300, 400, 500,000 lines of code towards a neural net where the programming happens through data curation. So again, massive decision. Or LiDAR is another beautiful example of how taking away solutions or constraining yourself into a lower cost, faster iteration environment, maybe in the short term makes it harder to execute, but in the long term delivers incredible results. Another nice example I want to mention here is the Whipper blades by Tesla. Famously, they are end-to-end trained, or at least that's what they claim. But doesn't matter. What happened apparently is that in the early days, this is something Karpati talked about when they had explicit programming. That's not very hard, actually. Imagine you have Whipper blades, and you just tell them, listen, when it rains, please clean the front window, and Musk didn't want that. He wanted the technology to learn and figure out when to activate those things and when not to activate them. And in the early days, it was really difficult to do end-to-end. So, for example, dust or sand was interpreted as rain, and then the things will go on, and it was just not a good experience in the early days. Even today, to be honest, sometimes the car does weird things with whipper blades. They don't turn on when it rains, and they turn on when it doesn't rain, and things like that. But overall, it's fine. Plus, you always have the manual. I mean, you don't have to put them on auto, but we actually have it on auto 95% of the time, and it's fine. So again, like, you make long-term decisions, risky decisions that require your employees to really galvanize around the problem and then solve it. Another example of why it takes balls is look what Musk did last Friday when he did the FSD12 presentation live in his car on an iPhone, recorded Twitter Spaces, all of that stuff. No big production, none of that stuff, but he did it, and he put himself, his employees, and the company on the line. I mean, this could have gone wrong. There could have been embarrassing interventions and all kinds of stuff. There was one intervention, and that's fine. But my point is, like, to put your whole employees, your whole AI staff on the on stage like that, it takes balls. It takes balls to work for a company like that. This is not just a meeting that you have where the CEO discusses pros and cons of a product. This is, show me what you got. Well, let's go out there and test it. This is almost, I always say, the one good thing about athletes is really that they constantly calibrate themselves in competition. There's no such thing as an athlete who's full of herself, right? You can't be full of yourself. You because every weekend, depending on the sport, mostly on the weekends, you get tested. And yes, if you're, if you get to the pinnacle of the sport, Cristiano Ronaldo or Messi or Michael Jordan and John Jones, and you name all those GOATs, maybe you get full of yourself, but at least you still have to test yourself. And most people are not full of themselves, excuse me, because they test themselves. And I think Musk is using a similar example, a similar strategy by putting himself on the line all the time. He of course, sometimes has to do this. Let's say with SpaceX, you just don't have a choice. The rocket either flies or it doesn't fly, and everybody's on the line every time there's a launch. So why am I talking about all this? This is a pretty big digression now towards the solution, which is, okay, what is the AI opportunity? The opportunity is we have a new architecture in compute, which is launching a new area, I would say, a whole industrial revolution that we will call the age of AI, probably, or something along those lines. It's driven by accelerated compute and generative AI. There's a convolution of factors. There's the ability to also train robots end to end, which is a new tangential thing towards this idea of generative AI. Okay, this is tangential. It's not it doesn't follow one from the other. It's almost a coincidence, if you will. Yeah, something like when we had the railway, we also had innovation in steel and bridge technology, so we could build those railways with better steel and better bridges, something like that, which is not directly correlated, but of course it is, because of the railway, you had more incentive to invest in steel manufacturing and steel alloys, and therefore there was also innovation on that front. But nevertheless, it's tangential. It's not directly correlated. Let's say having chatbots is a direct emergent factor coming out of generative AI. Robots, end-to-end learned robots, is not. I want to say one more thing, which is, and this is really the conclusion to the question, what is the opportunity in AI? The purpose of this podcast is to give people a sense of what it feels like to run a hedge fund. The purpose of Orange Capital Partners is to generate wealth by investing in fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices. We want to generate wealth. And a lot of people always talk about the new wave of startups coming out with this new compute architecture, when in reality, the money is very often made by incumbents. It is a few of them. It's very difficult to pick which one. but typically it's the incumbents. If you look back for the last 30, 40 years, where we had one big industrial revolution, which is the internet, or if you want a bit more technical term, distributed compute, which was the revolution that culminated in the 90s and proliferated us into the 21st century. And the big winners, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, and Facebook. So there is certainly, Facebook was a startup. So not everybody was an incumbent, and picking Facebook was the right thing to do. But the reality is everybody else just became a sideshow. And I don't want to be disrespectful. Again, I always say that to, whenever we talk about these things at Orange Capital Partners. We at Orange Capital Partners, we're in the dollar generation business, okay? We want to invest in companies that generate lots of wealth in dollars. So for example, NVIDIA went from 100 billion to 1.2 trillion. That's a trillion in market cap generation. Apple generated 2 trillion, Amazon 1 trillion, Microsoft a trillion, or trillion and a half in value over the last 10, 15 years. Those are real dollars. That's also, these are good percentages, but what matters much more is the dollars. Now, what about all the startups that came? The Ubers, the Airbnbs, the Lyfts, the Instacarts, and all that stuff, the Stripes, and the okay? You add them all up, you get to probably 1 trillion, maybe 2 trillion. So it's a big number. But those are all the startups. The problem with that is, number one, you have a lot of losses also attached to that, and I don't know what the net effect is. My point is the following. It's not the startups that are the exciting thing. It's the incumbents. It's those large companies that can take advantage of this new compute infrastructure and leverage their business on top of it and then generate dollar wealth. That's what we're after, and we believe that is the opportunity. In our case, it's Tesla and NVIDIA. That's where we have our investments. There could be also, again, maybe somebody like Google or Microsoft could pivot into an AI, generative AI type business. Or it could be the startup that we don't know about yet. I'm not saying there's no law of physics that says it's not going to be a startup. I'm just saying, as an investor, you want to pay attention to the large companies that can leverage compute infrastructure when there is a new compute architectural revolution like we have right now. To summarize, the opportunity of AI is new compute, accelerated compute, and generative AI, convoluting with the fact that we have end-to-end learning for robots, which will proliferate real-world AI and actually real-world intelligence, which is the only intelligence that actually matters, because that's the kind of intelligence that human beings have been developing over the last hundreds of thousands of years. And I think as an investor, and this is the point I want to get across here, you have to make a decision, okay? If you're in the wealth generating business, then you're in the dollar generating business. You want to look for the companies that can leverage that technology the best, and those are typically incumbents. Or if you want to be in the percentage business, which is, I call it sort of the darts business, the VCs and all those types, where you have good stories, or, we invested early in Uber or in Airbnb, but in the end, the wealth creation in those types of businesses as an aggregate is fairly pedestrian. You have to decide which one you want to be on. We at Orange Capital Partners, we're in the dollar generating business. Right now, our largest positions are Tesla and NVIDIA. Thank you.